Hey there, just in case you missed it, or maybe our live feed actually failed, or even better, you joined us for our New Year's sparkling New Year's Eve quilt sew along and you just wanted a quick short form follow-up. Well, here you go. We're going to do the full tutorial, but we're going to keep it a mystery as we sew along so that all of you can enjoy. Are you ready? Let's get started. Well, welcome back to another episode of Sew Well. I am your host, Rob Appell from Stitchin Heaven out in Quitman, Texas. And this is going to be a super fun tutorial because this is going to be the recap of our wonderful, sparkling New Year's Eve Quilt Along event that we just did live, or you might have actually been trying to watch it live right this second and something failed with our live feed. So I made us this insurance policy tutorial, and I'm very, very sorry that my dear friend and colleague in this Quilt Along, Tiffany Hayes, could not be here, but I'm actually pre-recording this, obviously, as I'm building the quilt in secret for all of you so that I can learn the instructions that were provided in the awesome pattern or the kit. And you can get that for free. So if you're also just watching this for your very first time, the sew along's way in the rear view mirror, please feel free to download the wonderful patterns. We did partner with Craftsy National Quilting Circle with this, and it's just a really, really great quilt. And I'm going to walk you through it here getting started. I'm using our quilt kit from Stitchin Heaven that were available. We had both print and batik. So this was the print fabrics. There's 4 fabrics necessary, and we're going to refer to them in alphabetical or light value order. So color A is from lightest to D, your darkest. So A, B, C, D. These were my fabrics in my print kit, and because it was a mystery, we actually offered several different kits to make it fun. And oh my goodness, I'm certainly going to remake this as a scrappy quilt, even though I'm not a scrappy dude. I think it's going to be awesome. So these are the fabrics. The first thing, and a lot of you received these in advance, were the cutting instructions and the supply list. So I'm going to use many of the supplies that were on the list. Some of these were supplies that I just didn't have here at home, but I also have them at the studio. And then we've also offered this cutting list. So let's just zip forward as I tidy this up real quick here. In the cutting list, we did use our large 8.5 by 24 inch ruler to cut down strips of all of the fabrics, all the way down to actually the bindings. So your cutting information gives you bindings, exterior border, interior border, also information on squares, and some of those squares are subcut into small and medium triangles, okay? So this is all the way down as far as we need to go in the mystery of what we're doing so far. If you're following along in our patterns, we're on step 1. And then we also added some information. We thought this might help you speed things up, because what we're gonna do is a lot of the same thing together. So I like using my Martelli mat for this as well as cutting. I'm going to do some marking right now. So I'm taking my entire stack of my 5 3/4 inch light color, or my fabric A squares. And as you see right here in the diagram now, we're going to go ahead and mark on the back side, the wrong side of the fabric. The sewing side, I guess we should start calling it. No one wants to be called the wrong side, right? Using my quilter's magic wand, I'm putting my little center line from corner to corner, and I'm going to go ahead and make myself a nice sewing line marked. And this is why I like this, so I can just spin this very easy, keeping all of this very efficient. And I'm going to go ahead and do that to all of the light colored squares. These light colored squares are going to be paired in different quantities to your medium and your dark fabric. So your medium B fabric and your dark D fabric will be paired up with these squares. And we want to make sure that we have both diagonals drawn, even though I'm still thinking in mystery mode here. I'm sure if Tiffany was here, she would have caught that. But yes, you're going to have 4 lines on every square. Both diagonals are going to draw on here for a really cool technique I'm going to walk you through here in just a second. Okay, so 4 lines on each of your squares that you have of your large light color fabric square. And like I said, I'm going to go through over the time, and I can actually even tell you with the medium color square, we're going to do 27. like that. Line them up right sides together. And then we are going to use 34 of our dark squares. And that's, again, all from your cutting instructions and that updated drawing set instructions. Go ahead and set those aside. We'll get back to those. Okay, so now we're going to dive on to part 2 of the mystery. We're going to start sewing our smallest units together first. We're going to make these mini parts into bigger parts, and that's going to consist of our 2 different mediums, our B and our C fabrics like this. And all of these are going to be sewn exactly the same. So just take a moment and follow your orientation, right? So what I will do on a situation like this, after I stop spinning my units around in circles for the longest time, right? I'm going to come in here and matching up this darker of the 2. Da, 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 da. It seems like it takes forever, especially when you're all watching from home, from the lightest of the 2, just like that. Okay, so then what I do is I find myself folding these over, right sides together, and then as I take them over to the sewing machine, you'll probably see I have several of them already lined up and in that same exact order. And what I'm going to do is I just set them up, and I like to chain piece these, but I'm going to start up here at this upper corner, the flat corner, and sew through the little bottom corner. All of our sewing is with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I let a few stitches get in between here. But if you're brand new to quilting, welcome to the club. It gets pretty addicting pretty fast. But this is what's called chain piecing. I'm just feeding through all of these squares as I go. Just watching the edge of my foot all the way through from that flat edge down to the corner. I just feel that's one of my personal tips that I've learned that has really helped me with a little bit of accuracy in this particular kind of quilt making. I would then do everything like my grandfather, I'm sure that was Henry Ford, right? In assembly line fashion. I come over to the ironing surface and I'm going to press all of these. Now I'm going to press these to the darker of the 2 fabrics because that's just kind of traditional quilt making. It really won't matter in this particular situation where you're not nesting these seams to the next. Gosh, I hope I'm not giving you too much information moving ahead and spoiling the mystery, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and take a moment. Press those over. I love having this wool pressing mat. It really helps. This is a trick I learned from Abby too. I can actually set up a unit, let it press itself, get my next units ready, and keep on pressing as I go. Okay, so that is creating all of these. And yes, folks, I'm going to ask you to make 72 of these. And again, if you're watching this version of the Sparkly New Year's Quilt Along, right, this is the recorded version. So just slow down and enjoy this as one of your first quilt projects for the whole new year. Okay, nothing to be in a rush for today. Get all of my units set back together, all 72 of those in stacks, all nice and tidy, and I'm going to deal with those dog ears or these corners in a little bit. The next thing we're going to do is we had our next size up. Our A fabrics were also cut into triangles starting from squares. We're going to take these now and we're going to match these to our other triangle units we just built, making what's referred to as a 1/4 square triangle. These are going to go like this, right sides together, and I kind of get in the habit of sewing so I can see my seam as I'm going to the machine, and I'm just going to line these up the best I possibly can. You'll probably find, if you quilt at all like me, not everything is going to be the exact same size. Partly we're going to do some trimming for some accuracy, and I will talk about what happens if we don't a little bit later on in the video. So I'm just going to go ahead and take a moment and match up these while we go. And again, you could lay your solid on top of your patchwork or your patchworks on top of your solids. I prefer to be able to see what's going on with my seams when I can, so I can keep my finger on the top of it, help it underneath that presser foot when necessary. Sometimes you'll find something like this that feel drastically different size. Use your points to match it up in your straight lines along the bottom. If anything, you might want to even split the difference a little bit so it kind of lays in the center of the bigger piece. And you can cheat that when you get over here to the 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can see I still have plenty of bite into my light color fabric, but I'm using that other real edge as that 1/4 inch seam allowance marking. Now with these units, I'm going to press into the single triangle away from the pieced triangle. I know I'm pressing into my lighter fabrics at this point, but it really is easier on the cloth if we do it this way. This is kind of a nice cream color fabric in my kit. I don't see a lot of bleed through with the seam, so it's just why many of us will teach you, please press to the dark side. What I really like to do is press to the same for all of them so that it's just easier to keep track of. Maybe it's back to that Henry Ford style behavior. Oh, and I really should have pointed out at this point, I do apologize. We have said that this wonderful, clearly perfect slotted trimmer is a fantastic tool, which it certainly is. Although, you want to use it before you press open your seams. So, if you want to use your slotted trimmer for dog-earing your corners, we are now looking for a 2.5 inch, I guess we're going to call this a raw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my 2.5 inch threads right along there, and this is the perfect example. This is the one that was far too large, and I can see that in the way it was put together. So now let's talk about accuracy a little bit more. The quilt that I've been working on, I have chosen to make my squares without doing a lot of this precise trimming, in case that was a question many of you were concerned about. And I can tell you, because I'm a little further along than you think I am, it has not been a problem at all. However, a lot of us really pride ourselves in precision patchwork, and therefore you're going to want to take each of these blocks at this point and trim them down to 2.5, and this is where your slotted trimmer comes in so wonderfully handy. So you can trim the outside, you're actually trimming all 4 edges in 2 cuts now, like that, and I use my 2.5 inch marker there, and then I'm going to come back in and I'm going to get into the dog ears, and a lot of times you're going to want to use your 28mm cutter for this. I just happen to have my 28 in my hand. Sorry, did I not say 45? I probably should have said 45. So anyways, that's awesome because that will go ahead and make you a perfect 2.5 inch 1/4 square triangle. All of the dog ears have been removed. But like I said, a lot of mine, I was looking at this, boy, I'm in a hurry. I've got so many of these to do. How would some of you approach this? So I did the dangerous maneuver, nothing to protect my hand. I did continue to use the mat, which is really nice for the rotation. And I just went in and I cut those. And you can actually see this one and this one are not the same. So if you're after accuracy, do all of this. If you're just learning quilting and you're really a little bit overwhelmed because I just said you have to make 72 of these units, let's not trim so much. Follow along, maybe watch the entire video before you go any further. It might help. That's the benefit of these sewing videos. Nonetheless, let's get rid of these dog ears real quick here. And they're always fun to put in a pile and then get on your socks and track all over the house. And everyone knows what you've been quilting on lately. There's evidence everywhere. But yes, build all 72 of those, set those aside, and let's get ready to move on to our next step. Part 3, we are going to go ahead and now handle and make a bunch of half square triangles all at the same time using these squares we were just marking. So this information you're seeing on part 3 is repeated information that was part of your cutting and marking instructions. Again, drawing multiple diagonal lines, utilizing your center in that quilter's magic wand or 1/4 inch from center. We now have 4 diagonal lines on each. And we're going to go ahead and go to the machine, and we're going to go ahead now and we're going to sew right on those lines. I'm just stitching, and I've done a lot of these already, so I actually found for me, my particular mark was just inside of the pencil mark. As I come down to this end, I did not even bother cutting threads. I just left the foot down, did a swing around, kind of like I would if I was chain piecing or curving. I'm going to go ahead and follow this line. I do recommend many of you put a couple of straight pins. That's what the instructions call for. I just happen to have now done many of these, so I'm feeling fairly confident. This is a great technique, and when we are done, we are going to have 8 half square triangles from these 2 squares. Let me go ahead and finish stitching these out real quick for us. Okay, folks, now as you can see, I have already stitched those light squares to all of my medium and my dark squares. You can see all the lines of stitching. Let me show you how to cut these. And you could use your large rectangular ruler or a smaller square or rectangular ruler. But I also think it's pretty fun, although I thought I just lost it. The slotted trimmer is a really cool tool because you can use it for a variety of other reasons. So I'm just going to goof around right now and show you some of those other reasons. Please keep in mind, you could definitely do this with a standard straight edge. But our cuts to get 8 of our half square triangles out of this, we're going to make one cut vertically, we're going to make one cut horizontally, and I'm using these threads here as my guidance. Then we're going to follow the diagonals, and we're going to try to do most of that without moving, and that's where this Martelli rotating mat is really, really, really handy. So the first thing I'm going to do literally is I'm just going to go ahead and find those two edges using my straight edge on my slotted trimmer, and I'm going right through where those marks were with the thread. I'm going to go ahead and lift up, and if anything moves, just push it back together. Come right around here this way, and now I can use the awesome straight line, find that right back in there, and that just helps confirm I'm keeping things nice and perpendicular. Again, crossing over where the threads cross or laying over where the threads cross. I've now cut 4 squares technically, and now because the slotted trimmer happens to be just long enough and I've got a 1/4 inch marker, or even better, let's just go tip to tip on these in case something is shifted or moved. We're just splitting the difference in here, so I've now cut a diagonal. And the last diagonal here, and when that's all done, I have technically yielded myself 8 half square triangles, and I of course pointed that out, that was right sides together. These are going to need to also be 2.5 inch raw units at this point. So you can, again, before you go to your ironing station, you can take your wonderful slotted trimmer, you can lay that right on here, but you can see most of these, because the way they're made, are so dang close that you might only be shaving and shaving like that. So that's what I found, is I started with this unit as well, and I was doing so little trimming that I decided not to trim and see what happened at the end of the quilt project. You could of course still do your dog earing this way with the slotted trimmer. It gives you a perfect dog ear. And that will also help you with your accuracy. Over time, you might find that you just start to eyeball it. And I did a lot of that as well, and it wasn't nearly as accurate if you're taking and comparing notes with me. Efficiency speaking, what I like to do is I like to now stack these all in order with the darker of the 2 fabrics on top. Okay, so you'll go ahead, you'll knock off those dog ears, however you want to do it. Another trick you can do is you can just use your slotted trimmer to line up the outside edge and the outside edge, give you a cut that way, and rotate it again. You don't even have to spin it, and you can rotate this way. Just another little trick, another great bonus in having that tool as you go ahead and work through those. Now, as I get ready to press these, I'm going to go ahead and hold this triangle in the air, the darker of the 2 fabrics. If you just pick that up and then let your iron set on top of it like this, you're going ahead and effectively pressing it to the dark side, and you're going to want to do this for all of your half square triangles. Some of you might be in the habit of pressing your squares open first and then doing your trimming using something like a block lock ruler or a standard ruler to trim these down. Either way really will work, as long as we're pretty dang close to 2.5 when we're finished. That's what we're shooting for in all of these sizes. Now, in this block here, we're moving on to part 4, and I hope you're seated down. Spoiler alert, if you're jumping ahead, here we go. You're seeing the first block unit. This is what it's going to look like. Oh, let's not burn down the house over here. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to start to use those 1/4 square triangles in the center, and we're going to perimeter them with these half square triangles of the medium fabric we just made, and when we're all done, this is what it's going to look like. And I think it's really, really cool the way this pinwheel comes together. Now, I've already made almost all of the units, and I want to show you what I've done because I did find this to be quite efficient. Okay, so now we are going to start in the middle, and I always like to have my diagram real close so I can see it, I can look at it, and make sure everything is starting as it should. So in my first diagram, I've got my lightest triangle up like this, then I'm bringing in a dark one like this. So we're pinwheeling with our darkest in the center, going out to our mediums and our lights. Now, if you've never made pinwheel blocks before, there's a really easy way to do this, and I always like to think in arrows. But I'm going to be thinking in downward arrows for piecing today. So if I take this grouping and I rotate it, that's still the seam. Now they're exactly the same. So you can do this for all of the centers, enough for 18, and they're going to need 4 blocks to make those centers, or all of your pinwheels. Sorry, I was jumping ahead mathematically for another thing I want to teach you in just a second. But if you'll take all of these and just flop them over like this, now they're all lined up, and we can go right back to chain piecing. We can manage our seams by having it up on the top. So we're just going to drop that, press our foot down, and for this block A unit, I went ahead and made all of my center pinwheel sections first by grouping 2 by 2. When I get back over to the pressing station, over to my wool mat, again, I'm pushing into that larger triangle because it's just easier on the fabric. And then once that happens, we can go back in, facing the same direction, rotate one of them, and now we're to our pinwheel. I like to finish this off right now by nesting up those seams. That's why we were pressing them in the same direction, because now they're heading in opposite directions. And we're going to build all of these squares first for the center of these block A units. Quilt's starting to sparkle along, I'll say, too. For these, there's no rhyme or reason, so just press whichever direction works for you. And the rest of the block itself is going to be created utilizing the light and medium combos of your half square triangles. Okay? For orientation, let's build another one of these arrows here. And in the center of each of those pinwheels. So we now have units like this. Notice they all look the same. So you really can. You can come over here, and this is where my math was jumping ahead. You'll need 4 times 18 of these. And again, sewing from that flat edge down to the bottom corner. Now both bottom corners of the triangles meet up down there. Okay, and after you have those units chain pieced together in pairs, making all of your little arrows, I take a moment and I'm going to go ahead and press these. Again, there's no real right or wrong, so maybe we just press all of these to the same direction. I'm pressing them over to the left-hand side right now. One of the cool things about the construction of this particular block is there's no sashings or things that are of different sizes. So all of our units can be matched up. Again, kind of a cheater's style of quilting, like myself. Okay, so these points are going to go right back in where they were before. And the rest of the block unit is constructed by taking your same half square triangles with your medium and your light, and then placing them so that medium is on the outside, kind of forming this diamond-shaped perimeter. Now, the way my eye sees that is, or the way I break this down for stitching, and I certainly do this when I've got a lot of the exact same ones to do, is we're just going to start to think in 3 rows. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch these together first, matching up the center seams. So what I'm also trying to say, if you're following the sloppy method, as long as you're able to match up the points as well as possible without tugging or pulling or stretching or distorting, you're going to have a little bit of give in the bias the way these are constructed, but just give yourself a little extra Line those up, hold it, make sure they're nice, and then worry about the next one. Come back down to that next edge and line it up. Hold that tight. You may want a stiletto or something like this. I'm not crossing over my seams right now, so as long as I keep my orientation correct, I can just rotate and grab this other one, drop it on, and we're just going to go ahead and patch that in as well. Taking a moment to make sure those center seams match as nicely as possible. We're actually building 2 blocks, but there'll be 3 design elements in the quilt. And so we want to make sure that we're honoring as many of our points as possible. I'll take a moment, come over here and create this new rectangle. And for now, I guess I'm just going to press, again, in one direction. Not much rhyme or reason at this point. So I went ahead and I did this for all 18 units as well. So I had a stack of these, had a stack of these sections like this made just to make things more efficient. At this point, the easiest way to see this unit, so you're keeping your eyes, is you're just sewing the opposites, or you're making this wonderful, what is that, a parallelogram or something fun? So now I'm just going to flop this over. Nice thing is I don't have those 2 corners coming together on the same point any longer. And I'll go ahead and stitch these on. And the nice thing about this is we can start to chain piece a little bit more, working off of our design board. And here's a really good example. I don't know if you can tell on this one, but there's a lot of fabric. It looks like this is much smaller than this square here. And that's okay. I'm just going to kind of split the difference. Remember, that 1/4 inch seam allowance is a lot bigger than we think it is. We've got a lot of thread in there that we can really get a nice bite on our fabric and come on down. So you can see where that bottom corner didn't line up perfect. It's not going to negatively affect the quilt. There's a balance in that. And the more you quilt, the more you'll get a feel for it. Go ahead and rotate your blocks. You can go ahead and even just match these up right over here at the presser foot. Just line those up so they're heading in opposite directions again. Once you do a couple of them, they get very, very easy. So I will really encourage you to do one step at a time. Pause the video, come back, do the next step. That's what we're here for. You've got your printed pattern from your free download there. Just enjoy. It's a wonderful quilt. So these particular ones, I guess I was pressing in one direction. Maybe I could try to press in the opposite by rotating. Starts to make my head hurt a little bit when I think about it. I'd rather just make the quilt, but truly that is what we should be considering each time. So you could do the same for this one. Oop, that's not true. I got to spin it. Now just go ahead, make sure you're keeping your points pointing out, and we're all done with block A. Once you have those outside parts put on to the center, go ahead and press them out. And you finished at least one of your block A. And as a reminder, I'm going to double check, but yes, I was correct. You definitely need to make 18 of these. Do it the way I did. You'll find it's very efficient. When I was putting them all together, I was able to knock them out in maybe an hour and a half's worth of sewing once I had all the pre-sewing done of the half square triangles. So that's what you're looking for. The fun pinwheel, the diamond around the outside. Set all those aside and let's move on to the next step. We're going to go ahead and start to look at part 5. Here it is. And folks, I hate to disappoint you, but it's even simpler than the part 4, the block A. So block B, if you're looking real close, is just more of the half square triangles. We're going to use those half square triangles that came from our dark square and our lightest square, and you're going to need 4 by 4, which is 16 per block. We're going to need 17 of these blocks, and you're really going to go ahead and just put them all together to make what becomes, here it is, your B block or your B unit, right? So that's where we're going to, but let me show you how I built them. Because a lot of with these, you don't want to get going so fast that you accidentally make mistakes and don't find those until later, especially if you've already quilted it. Those would just be left in place, I think. So look at your diagram. Like I said, keep it close, but as I was building these, I would build one, stitch it, build one, stitch it as I went. It went quite quickly, and I like to start with my 2 dark triangles for my upper point there. Now what I look at as the next ones coming down are going to form a light colored diamond like this. And then my last 2 form a black point coming down. So that's half the block there. The other parts are going to form the same black points to the sides. Here, here, and here. And then just like on our A block, we have our darker fabrics on the outside edge, like this, to go ahead and form that same style perimeter you were seeing in your A block, okay? So with that, now we're going to go ahead and piece these a little bit differently. It's a little easier to not get lost this way if you ask me, because like I said, I've done several of these. So you notice how close it is to my sewing machine. What I really am going to do is I'm just going to match up 2 by 2, but one grouping at a time. And I'm going to come to the machine, and this was my secret as I did some sewing here, then here. Same thing, working through from that corner closest to the machine all the way up to this last corner, keeping the pairs. That's going to be really crucial for the efficiency of speed sewing this in a little bit, keeping those pairs. You might even want to group your pairs and put your seams facing your sewing machine, but you want to make sure you keep them in order. I want to keep those 2 together. I want to keep these 2 together, and the seam is always facing the sewing machine. Now, as I go to my cutter on my machine or my little thread block, I'm going to cut 2 and I'm going to set them in a group. I'm going to cut 2, the 2, and set them in a group. Not any 2, the 2 in the order, and I'm still setting them in the group. Now, if these groups were somehow to get mismatched, you'd be able to find it from this step on, but let's try not to, okay? Now, as we open these up, the first ones are gonna be those black tips. So now we're gonna match the black tips. And you notice I haven't even pressed anything yet. That's another part of this trick. So the next units technically should have white tips that match up. And in this particular block, they all form that arrow shape. So it becomes fairly easy to stay accurate at the machine without having to return to the design wall or your reference pattern too much in this stage while building block B. The second ones again, or the third ones I should say, matching up the light colors to form that arrow point tip that I keep referring to, and the last ones will be the darks that we started with. If you rotate them, they'll still work, so don't panic. Have a little faith. So you can see how quick we just nailed 4 rows out on that 16-piece block. As I bring them over to my ironing station, what I want to find first is one of the ones with the black tip. I'm going to press this block in the same order I choose to sew it in later. So now I'm going to catch each seam as I go. And this will allow for some seam nesting in the next phase of sewing. This white diamond fits in here like this. So my rotation is I spin the fabric because I often iron from this right side of my body to my left side of my body. Now the third one, leave it as its normal location, pointing down. And the fourth one will actually be just like the upper one, which is in its inappropriate rotation now, but makes for the ironing of the seams. You see how quickly that worked? And this is a cool rhythm to get into because you're making this block boom, boom, boom like this 17 times. Don't forget to rotate these back, however, folks. And then my next trick really is I'm going to go ahead and match, if I don't fall over on the set, I'm going to go ahead and match up the arrow points and the arrow points. So these together now, taking the time to just match up and nest the block units as they go. Now here you're going to see again, all of these edges are not perfect because I didn't trim the half square triangles, right? Here's my example. But watch, I'm catching the inner piece and the outer piece represented the 1/4 inch. We're fine. This quilt is not going anywhere. Really not worth losing sleep over. Before I even cut those threads, I'm going to come back over here, make sure I've got the correct side for my seams. Drop it under the presser foot, lock up these 2 seams down here, and just go for it. Back at the ironing board, I'm going to still keep pressing the blocks in the order, or the parts in the order that we're building the block, pushing the arrow this way this time. And if I keep my arrow the way it's supposed to be, and I push this way this time, then all of the seams will be traveling in the same direction when I finish sewing this unit together here for the final block. Do your best to match up those center seams if you can. That's where it'll kind of show the most. Finish it out. And now as I come off the machine, I'm just seeing which way I had already been pressing those. We now have 4 points is why that happens. And now I just press to follow so that on the back of this block, most of the seams are heading in the right direction. And this is a perfect example of what I want to talk about next, because it is time, folks. We made it through. Remember, 17 of those block Bs are what you need to do. But as we jump into part 6, this is it. The mystery is over, and you can even start to see where that third design element is really coming together. It's going to be a kind of diamond checkerboard using these corners. It's rad. So here's what we're going to do now, is we're going to start to sew our rows together in alternating format. Block A, block B, block A, block B. Then in the next row, block B, block A, so that it also makes kind of that light, dark checkerboard effect. Really, really cool. Now this is what I've been talking about through the entire video, however, folks. You can really see that this particular corner, it looks like it's lacking. It looks like it's got an issue, and yeah, you can see that's not perfect, but let's not dive in too close. What I want us to focus on is, do we need to be concerned? Do we need to go ahead and take and trim all of these blocks down to make sure that all of the edges are perfectly square? And my answer is no. If you've been trimming as you go, you're probably in a perfect position right now. Everything looks gorgeous. If you didn't trim it all to begin with, like I did not, then you're in this situation where some of your blocks look a bit what I like to call wonky. However, if you stick with me for just a second, watch this. That's right. I already have 25 of the 35 squares stitched together All of them are untrimmed, and I dare you to notice from that far away. So what I'm really trying to say is I was able to manipulate the blocks as I pieced them together, and then the rows as I pieced them together, just like I was showing you with those individual squares, so that as we build and build and build, we can really make a nice quilt top, because this is what I love. We have all of these individual seams that we can work through and we can match up at the machine. So I don't want you to be panicked. If your blocks don't look absolutely terrific because you weren't trimming, this is our proof. It will work, and we don't even have to talk about will that quilt out. And the mystery's over, so I can go ahead now and stick this on the design board. We've got that up now. We can kind of refer to, as you can see, I was talking about the alternating dark light squares. And let's go ahead and just follow our pattern as we've been working, and start in this bottom corner right here and go ahead and grab a light square and a dark square. And let's take this really bad edge right here. And what I will do, because at this point the seams are just kind of going everywhere. I already tried to make them so they kind of worked with each other, but it wasn't worth the strain on my brain. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to go ahead and deal with this section so you can really hear what I'm talking about. I want to line these up, and we're just going to go one block at a time, and I'm not going to cheat much. As I put the squares together, I'm just going to line up the first points, not worrying about anything else. Now over here, it looks like this one's pretty wide and I can't see the bottom. So I'm just going to peek. I'm going to use this outside edge and have faith that I'm catching the underside. Not with a perfect quarter, but a little bit less, but I'm okay. Check again. Now this one's the same, but I can tell the next one down here is that short piece. So watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to stitch, and as I approach this corner, I can still see my bottom. And I'm going to just make sure, I had to cheat a little maybe. Let's see if we did it. That's probably about as bad as it's going to get, folks. But you can see we were still able to catch that. And if I don't tug and pull on it as I'm pressing it, it should be just fine. And again, I'm going to machine quilt this myself, so there's not as the need for the responsibility for getting this prepped for a long armor, because I can take care to be delicate with my seams. Now, my dear friend Tiffany, who's working on the batik version, she probably has all of her seams pressed out, or I should say pressed open, because that's one of the things that she loves to do. For us, we're just going to finish marrying up. There's 5 blocks per row, alternating fashion, marrying up these squares. Then you get your rows, sew your rows together, and we're ready for the borders. But before you join those squares together into rows, take the time, press each one as you go, keeping everything as tidy as possible. And now, even though I do need to add 2 more rows onto this quilt here, let's go ahead and talk about the borders that are going to go on to our project. Okay, so that's going to be part 7. We have an interior border, and that is made from our dark RD fabric. And there's enough cuts, and what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take these cuts, trim off your selvages, and we're going to straight piece these together. The instructions do not call for a mitered corner on these, but the instructions do and also offer enough fabric on your binding strips, the 2.5 inch wide binding strips of the dark. They are recommending, like we normally do, we do a bias binding. So let's put in our diagonals first on our pieces on our project. So we're going to put in the long rows on the edges, we'll call them, and then the top and the bottom will go on for our interior border. And then our exterior border is made from the medium C fabric, the darker of the 2 medium fabrics, right? And that's going to go on to go ahead and form your exterior border the same way with the same straight cuts. Very simple and easy. And then, like I was pointing out, we're going to bring back together. So you're going to have your wonderful exterior and there's your interior, and then you're going to use this binding. Of course, it'll be folded and folded again. So it'll be this nice, narrow, beautiful little piece that will go on once all of the quilting is finished. So we did it, folks. We made it all the way through the mystery quilt. Actually, hopefully twice. I really, really hope you were not watching this on December 31st, which means that our live feed failed. So we're really happy to have partnered with Craftsy for this awesome New Year's quilt along. I'm sure we'll be doing more of these in the future. So this has been super, super fun. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Like I said, enjoy the free pattern. Consider doing it as a scrappy. It'll be lots and lots of fun. I'm so disappointed that my dear friend Tiffany couldn't be here with me today to teach this with you, but you'll also be able to access that wild recorded version if you want from our live feed, where we made the soup, we made the quilt, we had a bunch of fun, we gave away a bunch of prizes and all of that. So again, thank you all for being here. I appreciate you. And in this brand new year, remember to stay well. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. It really helps support our channel. If you haven't subscribed, do so now. Hit the little button to be notified every time we go live or do a new video for all of you. And here's one from the past I think you'll really enjoy.